You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball when you least expect it. It was a Monday morning, a typical bustling scene at the international terminal of JFK, when a story began to unfold that would send ripples through the entire aviation industry. A story of prejudice power and a shocking twist of fate that would leave jaws on the floor. Get ready, because what you're about to hear isn't just a tale. It's a stark reminder that you never truly know who you're speaking to. This isn't just about a denied seat. It's about a man, a veteran, and the hard karma that came knocking when a seemingly small act of discrimination unraveled into a monumental downfall. The fluorescent lights of Terminal 4 hummed with the familiar symphony of international travel. Early morning was always a chaotic ballet of bleary-eyed travelers, hurried staff, and the constant announcements echoing through the vast space. Among them, a figure moved with a quiet dignity that belied the urgency of his destination. Dr. James "Jim" Harrison, a man whose tailored suit seemed to absorb the ambient chaos rather than contribute to it, navigated the throngs with practiced ease. His salt and pepper hair, meticulously groomed, framed a face etched with the wisdom of years and the subtle intensity of a man accustomed to leadership. Jim wasn't just a traveler. He was a force of nature, a retired Air Force colonel, and unbeknownst to most, the newly appointed Director of Operations for the entire John F. Kennedy International Airport. His journey this morning was personal yet professional. He was flying to a crucial aviation conference in London, an event that would solidify his vision for modernizing JFK's infrastructure. The flight, American Airlines Flight 134, was scheduled for a 7:30 a.m. departure. He had booked a first-class ticket months in advance, specifically selecting a window seat in the front row, a small luxury he allowed himself for long-haul flights. He valued efficiency, punctuality, and a smooth experience, tenets he preached to his staff daily. As he approached the American Airlines check-in counter, he noticed a longer than usual queue for first class. A sigh escaped him, barely audible. He'd arrived earlier than necessary, a habit ingrained from his military days, which usually insulated him from such delays. Today, however, seemed determined to test his patience. He glanced at his watch. 6:45 a.m. Plenty of time still. A young woman, no older than her mid-20s, with an impeccably tight bun and a name tag that read Sarah Jenkins, Customer Service Representative, was attending to a particularly demanding passenger. Sarah, known among her colleagues for her unwavering adherence to protocol and a somewhat rigid demeanor, was already looking flustered. Jim, observant as ever, noted the passenger's increasingly agitated tone and Sarah's equally unyielding posture. When it was finally his turn, Jim approached the counter with a polite smile. "Good morning," he offered, his voice a warm baritone. "Dr. James Harrison, Flight AA134 to London." He presented his passport and ticket confirmation. Sarah's eyes, a steely blue, scanned his documents. Her expression remained neutral, almost blank. She typed something into her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced speed. There was a pause, a beat too long. "Dr. Harrison," she began, her voice devoid of any particular warmth. "It appears there's an issue with your booking." Jim raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "An issue? I booked this ticket months ago. First-class seat. Why?" Sarah's lips thinned slightly. "Yes, well, the system is showing that your first-class seat has been reallocated." Jim's patience, usually boundless, began to fray at the edges. "Reallocated? On what grounds?" His voice remained calm, but there was an underlying firmness that hinted at his executive stature. "It seems there was an overbooking in first class. Sarah stated, avoiding eye contact as she continued to tap at her keyboard. "And your reservation appears to have been flagged for a downgrade." A downgrade? Jim felt a familiar prickle of annoyance. He had seen this play out before with other passengers, often without proper explanation or compensation. But for him, today, this was more than just an inconvenience. It was a disruption to a carefully planned schedule. "Ms. Jenkins," Jim said, leaning slightly closer, his gaze direct. "I assure you my reservation is in order. I have a confirmed first-class ticket. Is there a supervisor I can speak with?" Sarah finally looked up, her steely blue eyes meeting his. "Sir, I am handling this. And as I said, the system shows you've been downgraded to Economy Plus. We can offer you a voucher for future travel as compensation." She pushed a small, pre-printed form across the counter. The offer felt like an insult. A voucher for future travel when he had a critical international conference to attend and a first-class seat he had rightfully paid for. Jim's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that anger would only escalate the situation. "Ms. Jenkins," he reiterated, his voice a low, controlled rumble. "I need to be on this flight in my confirmed first-class seat. This conference is extremely important. Is there anything you can do to rectify this?" Sarah, however, had already turned her attention to the next passenger in line, a young blonde woman clutching a small dog carrier. "Next," she called out, effectively dismissing Jim. The dismissal, so blatant and unapologetic, stung. Jim, a man who had commanded squadrons and navigated international diplomatic waters, found himself standing at an airport counter, being rushed aside by a junior staff member. He decided to step aside, knowing that creating a scene would only delay him further. He would find a different approach. He was, after all, the airport director. But he wasn't going to pull that card just yet. He wanted to see how this played out. This was a test, he realized, of the very customer service standards he was working to implement across the airport. A test that American Airlines, at least through Sarah Jenkins, was failing spectacularly. Jim moved away from the main check-in counter, his mind racing. He wasn't usually one to make a fuss, but this felt different. It wasn't just about the comfort of a first-class seat. It was about the principle, the blatant disregard for a paid reservation, and the dismissive attitude he had just encountered. He pulled out his phone, his fingers hovering over the contact list. He could call his executive assistant Deborah, or even Mark Peterson, the general manager for American Airlines at JFK, directly. But a stubborn part of him wanted to try the official channels first. He wanted to see if the system, without his explicit intervention, would work as it was designed to. He spotted another American Airlines customer service desk further down the terminal, less crowded. Perhaps a different representative would be more helpful, more willing to investigate the alleged overbooking. He approached a man with a kind face and a name tag that read, "David Chen, Senior Customer Service." David looked up, a weary but polite smile on his face. "Good morning," Jim said, trying to maintain his calm demeanor. "I'm Dr. James Harrison on flight AA134 to London. I've just been told my first-class seat 1A has been reallocated due to an overbooking and I've been downgraded. I'd like to understand what happened and, more importantly, get my original seat back." David's smile faltered slightly as he began typing. His brow furrowed as he reviewed Jim's booking. After a moment, he looked up, a hint of genuine concern in his eyes. "Dr. Harrison, I apologize for this. It does show a downgrade here. However, it's not simply an overbooking." He paused, a hesitant look on his face. "Then what is it, Mr. Chen?" Jim pressed his voice, firm, but not aggressive. David leaned in, slightly lowering his voice. Sir, the notes here indicate a request came through from management priority to upgrade a specific passenger into your seat. It's unusual for a confirmed first-class booking to be overridden like this unless it's for a very senior company executive or a severe operational necessity. Jim's eyes narrowed. Management priority. Who exactly made this request? David scrolled further. It just says management override, urgent upgrade. There's no specific name attached to the request, but it was processed a few hours ago, and it appears the person upgraded is a Mr. Richard Sterling. Richard Sterling. The name meant nothing to Jim. He wasn't a known dignitary, nor a top American Airlines executive he was aware of. This was becoming increasingly suspicious. It wasn't a random overbooking. It was a targeted removal. So someone arbitrarily decided to give my seat away to a Mr. Sterling without notification or proper explanation, Jim asked, his voice now laced with a controlled indignation. And you're telling me there's nothing that can be done to reverse this? David looked genuinely distressed. Dr. Harrison, I understand your frustration. Unfortunately, once a management override is in the system, it's incredibly difficult for us at the counter level to reverse it. The system is locked. The only way would be a direct intervention from a very senior manager, someone at the level of our station manager, perhaps. And who is the station manager on duty this morning? Jim inquired, a plan already forming in his mind. He wasn't going to pull rank yet, not directly, but he knew exactly who to talk to within American Airlines hierarchy at JFK. That would be Mr. Michael Thompson, David replied, pointing vaguely towards an office entrance behind the check-in area. He's usually in his office by now. Jim thanked David, who offered another sincere apology for the inconvenience. As Jim walked towards the office marked Station Manager, American Airlines, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more than just a bureaucratic glitch was at play here. The specificity of the downgrade, the management priority tag, and the dismissive attitude of Sarah Jenkins, it all added up to a picture that felt less like an error and more like a deliberate act. He was determined to uncover the truth, not just for himself, but for every passenger who had ever been unfairly treated. He reached the office door and knocked firmly. A gruff voice from within called, "Come in." Jim entered to find a man in his late 50s with a receding hairline and a perpetually stressed expression hunched over a pile of paperwork. This was Michael Thompson, the American Airlines station manager for JFK. Jim had met him briefly during his initial rounds as airport director, but their interaction had been purely professional and somewhat perfunctory. "Mr. Thompson," Jim began, extending a hand. "Dr. James Harrison. We met a few weeks ago." Michael looked up, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but it quickly faded into an expression of mild annoyance. "Dr. Harrison, what can I do for you this early?" He didn't offer to shake Jim's hand, instead gesturing vaguely to a chair. Jim took a seat, maintaining his composure. "I'm on flight AA-134 to London. My first-class seat, 1A, has been arbitrarily given away, and I've been downgraded. I understand a management priority override was used. I'd like to know why, and I expect my original seat to be reinstated." Michael sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Dr. Harrison, I'm aware of the situation. Look, sometimes these things happen. Operational needs, last-minute changes. It's a busy airport." He gestured dismissively with a hand. "We've offered you an Economy Plus seat and a voucher. That's standard procedure." Standard procedure for a confirmed first-class passenger to be bumped for an unspecified management priority without a valid reason. Jim's voice was calm, but the undercurrent of authority was unmistakable. "And what exactly constitutes a management priority in this instance, Mr. Thompson, who is Mr. Richard Sterling, and why was his need for my seat considered more urgent than my confirmed booking?" Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. He picked up a pen and started tapping it against his desk, a clear sign of agitation. "Dr. Harrison, with all due respect, these are internal matters. We have discretion in these situations. Sometimes we need to accommodate our high-value clients or specific individuals for various reasons. Mr. Sterling is an important client, and his comfort was prioritized." "Important client," Jim repeated, a dangerous edge creeping into his voice. "More important than a confirmed paid first-class passenger. And what makes you believe you have the discretion to simply override a valid ticket without justification?" Michael scoffed, a sneer forming on his lips. "Look, Dr. Harrison, let's be frank. You're flying in first class, probably on a company dime. We've got a limited number of premium seats, and sometimes we need to make tough calls. Mr. Sterling is a loyal customer, a frequent flyer. We decided to accommodate him. You'll get to London just fine in Economy Plus." There was a dismissive wave of his hand, as if Jim's concerns were trivial. The words "company dime" and the overall condescending tone ignited a spark in Jim that was difficult to quell. This wasn't just about the seat anymore. This was about respect, about entitlement, and about a systemic disregard for customer rights that Jim, as airport director, found utterly unacceptable. He rose slowly from his chair, his stature commanding attention. "Mr. Thompson," Jim said, his voice now a low, powerful rumble that filled the office, "I advise you to reconsider your position. Not only have you unjustly downgraded a confirmed passenger, but your explanation is vague. Your reasoning is arbitrary, and your attitude, frankly, is appalling." Michael, however, seemed unfazed, perhaps even emboldened by what he perceived as Jim's impotence. "My attitude, Dr. Harrison, is a reflection of the realities of airline operations. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. Either take the Economy Plus seat or you can find another flight." He picked up his pen again, clearly dismissing Jim. "My decision is final." Jim stood there for a moment, his gaze unwavering, a silent battle of wills playing out in the small office. He realized now that he wouldn't get anywhere through standard channels with Michael Thompson. The man was arrogant, entrenched in his own power, and completely unwilling to listen. A different approach was needed. He turned and walked out of the office, his back ramrod straight. As the door clicked shut behind him, a sense of quiet determination settled over Jim. Michael Thompson had just made a very powerful enemy, and he had no idea who he was dealing with. As Jim walked away from Michael Thompson's office, the hum of the terminal seemed to grow louder, the incessant announcements more jarring. His mind was not on the missed first-class seat or the impending conference, but on the blatant disrespect and systemic arrogance he had just encountered. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a symptom of a larger problem, a culture that he, as airport director, was determined to eradicate. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Deborah's contact. Deborah Vance had been his executive assistant for the better part of a decade, first in the Air Force and now at JFK. She was meticulous, fiercely loyal, and knew exactly how to navigate the complex bureaucracy of any large organization. He decided to call her. "Deborah," Jim said, his voice calmer than he felt, "I need you to do something for me discreetly." "Anything, Colonel," Deborah replied instantly, her voice crisp and professional. She still used his military title, a habit born of long-standing respect. "I'm at Terminal 4, attempting to board AA-134 to London. American Airlines has downgraded me from first-class seat 1A due to an alleged management priority upgrade for a Mr. Richard Sterling. The station manager, Michael Thompson, has been less than helpful. In fact, he's been downright dismissive. He paused, letting the information sink in. Here's what I need. First, find out everything you can about this Mr. Richard Sterling and his management priority status. I want to know exactly who authorized this override. Second, I want a full report on Michael Thompson's professional history and any customer service complaints filed against him or his department within the last 6 months. And third, Jim's voice took on an even firmer tone. I want to speak with Mark Peterson, the general manager for American Airlines at JFK, within the next 10 minutes. If he's not available, I want to speak with his superior. Make it clear this is urgent and relates to a significant operational and customer service breach. Deborah didn't ask questions. She simply said, "Consider it done, Colonel. I'll be in touch shortly." Jim disconnected the call and headed towards a quiet corner of the terminal near a large window overlooking the runways. He watched a massive Airbus A380 being pushed back from its gate, a symbol of the very operations he oversaw. The irony was not lost on him. 10 minutes later, his phone rang. It was Deborah. Colonel Mark Peterson is on his way down to Terminal 4 now. He sends his sincerest apologies and says he'll meet you wherever you are. He was completely unaware of the situation. Good, Jim acknowledged. And the other requests? Mr. Sterling appears to be a regional sales manager for a mid-sized paper supply company. Deborah reported a hint of surprise in her voice. Definitely not a management priority in the sense of being a high-level executive or dignitary. The override request came from Michael Thompson himself, citing customer loyalty and strategic partnership enhancement as the reasons. It's highly irregular for a station manager to bump a confirmed first-class passenger for someone of Mr. Sterling's profile without explicit corporate approval, especially when it involves a full-fare ticket. Jim's jaw clenched. So Thompson just gave my seat away to someone he probably knows, or perhaps for a favor, and then lied about it being an important client or operational need. That seems to be the case, Colonel, Deborah confirmed. As for Thompson's history, I'm pulling detailed records now, but a preliminary check shows a concerning pattern. Several internal complaints from staff regarding his authoritarian management style and reports of preferential treatment for certain passengers, especially those he seems to know personally or those who fit a certain demographic. There are also a few external customer complaints regarding unexplained downgrades and dismissive service. Jim absorbed the information. This was even worse than he had initially thought. It wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a pattern of abuse of power. Thank you, Deborah. Keep digging. I'll handle Peterson. Just as he ended the call, he saw a man in a crisp American Airlines uniform, hurrying towards him. His face etched with a mixture of concern and genuine alarm. This was Mark Peterson, the general manager for American Airlines at JFK. Jim had a good working relationship with Mark, respecting his dedication to the airline, but now he was about to put that relationship to the ultimate test. "Dr. Harrison," Mark exclaimed, reaching him, his breath slightly labored. "My sincerest apologies, sir. Deborah just informed me of the situation. I am absolutely appalled. Please tell me everything." Jim recounted the events calmly, from Sarah Jenkins' dismissive attitude to Michael Thompson's arrogant refusal to reinstate his seat and his flimsy excuses. Mark listened intently, his face growing paler with each detail. "And then," Jim concluded, "Mr. Thompson explicitly told me his decision was final, and that I could either take the downgraded seat or find another flight. He made a point of suggesting I was flying on a company dime and therefore didn't deserve the consideration. Mark Peterson's jaw dropped. He said that to you. His eyes widened in disbelief. Dr. Harrison, I can assure you Michael Thompson had absolutely no authority to do any of that. Overriding a confirmed first-class booking for a non-executive is a severe breach of protocol, and his conduct, that is completely unacceptable. Jim simply nodded, allowing Mark to process the gravity of the situation. I am so incredibly sorry, sir. Mark reiterated, his voice filled with genuine remorse. This is not how American Airlines operates, and it is certainly not the standard of service we aim for, especially not for someone of your stature. My stature, Mr. Peterson, Jim corrected him gently, should be irrelevant. Every passenger deserves to be treated with respect and according to their confirmed booking. This isn't about me. It's about a clear pattern of abuse of power and disregard for customer service. Mark nodded vigorously. You are absolutely right, Dr. Harrison, and I promise you this will be addressed immediately and with the utmost seriousness. First, let's get you on your flight in your original first-class seat. That is non-negotiable. He pulled out his phone, already dialing. And I'll personally ensure Mr. Sterling is moved to an appropriate class with proper explanation and compensation. Before you do that, Mark, Jim interrupted, a glint in his eye. I have one request. I want to see how this plays out if I don't reveal who I am until the very last moment. I want Michael Thompson and Sarah Jenkins to face the consequences of their actions, not because they mistreated the airport director, but because they mistreated a passenger, a veteran, and refused to rectify a clear wrong. Mark paused, considering Jim's request. A slow understanding dawned on his face. You want them to learn a lesson that goes beyond just an apology to a VIP. Precisely, Jim affirmed. I want them to understand the impact of their decisions on real people. I want them to understand that their arrogance and disregard for protocol have consequences regardless of who is on the receiving end. Mark nodded, a grim determination replacing his initial panic. Understood, Dr. Harrison. I will ensure your first-class seat is secured and that Michael Thompson and Sarah Jenkins are informed of the error and that it has been corrected. But I will not reveal your identity until the appropriate time. Consider it done. As Mark walked away, already speaking into his phone, Jim felt a sense of vindication, not just for himself, but for every traveler who had ever felt powerless against the arbitrary decisions of airline staff. He knew that the wheels of karma were now turning, and for Michael Thompson and Sarah Jenkins. The ride was about to get very bumpy. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, one that would redefine the meaning of management priority at JFK. The boarding announcement for American Airlines Flight 134 to London began to echo through the terminal, its automated voice a stark contrast to the human drama unfolding. Jim, armed with a newfound resolve, made his way to Gate 22, where a small crowd had already gathered. He spotted Sarah Jenkins, the same customer service representative from the check-in counter, now assisting with the boarding process. Her tight bun and rigid posture were just as he remembered, and her expression remained impassive as she scanned boarding passes. Beside her, a man with a self-important air, adjusting his tie and checking his watch with exaggerated gestures, was also overseeing the boarding. This was Michael Thompson, the station manager, clearly enjoying his position of authority. He was chatting animatedly with a few passengers in what appeared to be the premium boarding line, occasionally glancing at the general boarding queue with a look of mild disdain. Jim decided to approach Sarah first. He wanted to see if her attitude had softened, if any new information had reached her, regarding his reinstated seat. He joined the first-class boarding line, his original boarding pass still in hand, the one clearly marked first-class seat 1A. As his turn came, Jim approached Sarah. "Good morning again, Ms. Jenkins," he said, his voice calm and even. "I believe there's been a correction to my booking. Dr. James Harrison, flight AA134, first class." He presented his original boarding pass. Sarah's eyes flickered from the pass to Jim's face. A subtle frown creased her brow. She took the pass and scanned it. Her fingers flew across the keyboard of her terminal, her expression hardening with each tap. "Sir," she said, her voice now edged with a familiar dismissiveness. "As I told you earlier, your first-class seat has been reallocated. You've been downgraded to Economy Plus. Your boarding pass will be for seat 32B. She produced a new flimsy boarding pass from the printer and pushed it across the counter, not even bothering to make eye contact. Jim felt a wave of incredulity wash over him. Mark Peterson had assured him the seat would be reinstated, yet here was Sarah still denying him his rightful place. It was clear that Michael Thompson had either ignored Mark's directive or more likely had actively undermined it, asserting his own misguided authority. "Ms. Jenkins," Jim said, his voice dropping slightly, the authority now undeniable. "I was explicitly informed by the General Manager, Mr. Mark Peterson, that my first-class seat 1A was reinstated. There must be a mistake. Please check again." Sarah let out a small, exasperated sigh. "Sir, with all due respect, I am following the system, and the system shows you are in Economy Plus. My manager, Mr. Thompson, made the final decision on this. There is no mistake." She glanced over at Michael, who was now observing their interaction with a smug expression. "Now please step aside and allow other passengers to board. You're holding up the line." At this point, Michael Thompson decided to intervene, strutting over with a confident air. "Is there a problem here, Sarah?" he asked, his voice booming slightly clearly, enjoying the public spectacle. "Just this gentleman, Mr. Thompson," Sarah replied, gesturing towards Jim with a subtle roll of her eyes. "He's insisting on a first-class seat that's clearly no longer his. I've explained the downgrade." Michael looked at Jim, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "Ah, Dr. Harrison. Still trying for that first-class seat, are we?" "As I told you in my office, my decision is final. You've been downgraded. Now stop disrupting the boarding process. Take your Economy Plus seat, or we'll have to deny you boarding entirely." The words hung in the air, thick with challenge and raw arrogance. Jim looked from Michael to Sarah, a silent assessment passing between them. They were a team, a duo of dismissiveness, perfectly illustrating everything he was trying to change at the airport. He took a deep breath, the moment of revelation now upon him. "Michael," Jim said, his voice calm but with an underlying steel that cut through the noise of the terminal. He used Michael's first name, a subtle shift in dynamic that seemed to momentarily catch the station manager off guard. "Do you truly understand who you are speaking to?" Michael scoffed, regaining his composure. "I know exactly who I'm speaking to, Dr. Harrison. A passenger who believes he's entitled to something he's not. Now, for the last time, move aside." He pointed decisively towards the Economy Plus boarding gate. Jim slowly reached into his wallet and pulled out a sleek black identification card. It wasn't an airline ID nor a simple government ID. It was a Port Authority of New York and New Jersey executive badge, prominently displaying his photograph and the title Director of Operations, John F. Kennedy International Airport. He held it up not ostentatiously, but clearly allowing both Michael and Sarah to see it. He then looked directly at Michael, his eyes unwavering. Michael Thompson. He enunciated each word slowly, deliberately. I am Dr. James Harrison, and I am the Airport Director for JFK. The effect was instantaneous and electrifying. Sarah's face, which had been contorted in annoyance, drained of all color, her jaw dropping open. Michael Thompson, who had been standing tall and arrogant just seconds before, physically recoiled as if struck. His eyes wide with sudden terror darted from the badge to Jim's face, a slow dawning horror replacing his earlier smugness. The casual chatter of the other passengers seemed to fade into a distant hum, as if the entire terminal had suddenly held its breath. You're the airport director. Michael stammered, his voice barely a whisper, his face turning a sickly shade of white. His bluster had completely evaporated, replaced by palpable fear. That is correct, Michael. Jim confirmed, his voice still calm, but now infused with a quiet power that commanded absolute attention. And you have not only unjustly downgraded a confirmed first-class passenger, but have also openly defied the general manager's directive to reinstate my seat, and then proceeded to treat me with an utterly unacceptable level of disrespect and arrogance. Sarah, meanwhile, looked as if she was about to faint. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes darting between Jim and Michael, a silent understanding of the catastrophic mistake they had made dawning on her. Jim turned his gaze slightly to Sarah. And Ms. Jenkins, your dismissive attitude both at the check-in counter and here is a direct reflection of the kind of customer service that damages this airport's reputation, and indeed, American Airlines' reputation. Michael Thompson finally found his voice, a pathetic whimper. Dr. Harrison, sir, I had no idea. I am so terribly sorry. It was a misunderstanding. I can fix this right now. Your seat, it's still open. I'll personally escort you. He began fumbling for his phone, his hands trembling. Jim raised a hand, stopping him. No, Michael. You had every opportunity to fix this earlier. You were given the chance not once, but twice. You chose to dismiss a paying customer, and worse, you chose to defy a superior's order. He looked around at the now silent and captivated onlookers, many of whom had stopped to witness the unfolding drama. This isn't just about my seat, Jim continued, his voice ringing with authority. This is about a systemic issue. It's about accountability. It's about the basic expectation of respect and professionalism that every single passenger deserves when they travel through this airport. The silence in the terminal was deafening, broken only by the distant roar of an engine. The hard karma had just landed, and it was about to hit Michael Thompson and Sarah Jenkins with the force of a Category 5 hurricane. The shock in Michael Thompson's and Sarah Jenkins's eyes was almost comical if the situation weren't so serious. Michael, pale and trembling, tried to regain some semblance of composure. Dr. Harrison, please, I beg you allow me to rectify this. I'll personally ensure you have the best seat on the plane, whatever you need. He gestured wildly towards the gate, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperate pleading. Jim, however, remained impassive. It's too late for that, Michael. The time for rectification was when I first approached Ms. Jenkins, and again when I spoke with you in your office, and a third time when Mr. Peterson explicitly instructed you to reinstate my seat. Each time you chose to dismiss and disrespect. At that moment, Mark Peterson, American Airlines General Manager, arrived at the gate, alerted by a panicked call from one of the other gate agents who had witnessed the dramatic revelation. He took in the scene, Jim calm and authoritative, and Michael a cowering wreck. Michael, what in the hell is going on here? Mark demanded, his voice sharp with anger. He had been assured the situation was handled. Michael stammered, unable to form coherent words. "Mr. Peterson, sir, I didn't realize. You didn't realize who the airport director was." Mark interjected, his voice laced with disbelief and fury. "And you chose to defy my direct order to reinstate Dr. Harrison's first-class seat. What do you have to say for yourself?" Michael hung his head, utterly defeated. I made a mistake, sir. A terrible mistake." Jim stepped forward, addressing Mark directly. "Mark, I appreciate your prompt attention. However, this is no longer just about my flight. This incident, combined with previous reports of Mr. Thompson's conduct and Ms. Jenkins' consistent dismissiveness, points to a clear failure in management and customer service within American Airlines operations at JFK. Mark's face was grim. He knew the implications of Jim's words, especially coming from the airport director. "Dr. Harrison, I understand completely. I assure you this will be handled with the utmost severity." He turned to Michael. "Michael Thompson, as of this moment, you are suspended pending a full internal investigation. Hand over your badge and company phone immediately." Michael looked up, his eyes wide, with a mixture of terror and resignation. "Suspended, sir, please, my family. You should have thought about your family before you abused your authority and disrespected a passenger, especially one of Dr. Harrison's standing." Mark cut him off, his voice firm. "And before you actively defied a direct order from your general manager." He then turned to Sarah. "Ms. Jenkins, your repeated dismissive conduct and failure to escalate a clear customer issue are also unacceptable. You are also suspended pending review. We will be looking at all customer complaints against you." Sarah burst into tears, her composure finally shattering. But Mr. Thompson told me. He said I had to follow his orders. Following orders does not excuse gross misconduct and a complete lack of judgment." Jim interjected, his voice stern. "You are expected to provide professional service to every passenger, regardless of who they are. Your role is not to be a gatekeeper of entitlements, but an enabler of smooth travel." Mark then took over, instructing another gate agent to ensure Jim was immediately boarded in his original first-class seat 1A. As Jim walked down the jet bridge, the scene behind him was a flurry of activity. Michael Thompson, looking utterly devastated, was handing over his badge and phone to Mark. Sarah Jenkins was sobbing uncontrollably, being comforted or perhaps chastised by another colleague. The hard karma had delivered its blow. Once on board in his comfortable first-class seat, Jim took a moment to reflect. He hadn't sought this confrontation, but it had been necessary. It was a powerful reminder that arrogance and abuse of power, no matter how small they seem, can have far-reaching and devastating consequences. He knew that this incident would send a clear message not only to American Airlines, but to all airline staff operating at JFK. Professionalism, respect, and adherence to protocol were not optional. They were fundamental requirements. His phone buzzed. It was Deborah. "Colonel, I've got the full report on Thompson. Multiple instances of similar behavior, even some allegations of diverting resources for personal gain. And Mr. Sterling, turns out he's a golf buddy of Thompson's from a local country club. Thompson upgraded him as a personal favor, not because of any strategic partnership." Jim sighed. It was even worse than he thought. "Thank you, Deborah. Ensure all of this is formally documented and passed on to Mark Peterson. I expect a full investigation, not just of Thompson, but of any systemic issues that allowed this to occur. And Mark will be speaking with me directly about American Airlines' internal review process for customer service." "Understood, Colonel," Deborah confirmed. "Have a good flight." As the plane began its taxi towards the runway, Jim looked out the window at the sprawling expanse of JFK. He was the airport director, a steward of this massive operation, and he was determined that incidents like this, born of arrogance and prejudice, would become a thing of the past. The hard karma had struck, and it was just the beginning of a much-needed overhaul. The news of the incident at Gate 22 spread like wildfire through the corridors of JFK Airport and swiftly within American Airlines' corporate structure. Within 24 hours of Jim Harrison's arrival in London, the ramifications were already profound. Michael Thompson, the former station manager, found his suspension swiftly converted into termination. The internal investigation, spearheaded by a furious Mark Peterson and fueled by Deborah Vance's meticulous reports, unearthed a trove of misconduct. Beyond the blatant disregard for protocol in downgrading Jim for his golf buddy Richard Sterling, there were documented instances of Thompson rerouting flight crews for personal convenience, misusing company resources, and a consistent pattern of prioritizing his personal connections over official policy. The strategic partnership enhancement, he cited, was exposed as a flimsy cover for personal favors. The report also highlighted numerous previous, less investigated complaints from both passengers and staff about his bullying management style and discriminatory practices, particularly towards passengers of color and those he deemed less important. The hard karma for Michael Thompson wasn't just a lost job. It was a ruined career and a reputation in tatters, effectively blacklisting him from any future position in the aviation industry. Sarah Jenkins, though not as culpable as Thompson, faced severe consequences. Her suspension also led to termination. While she argued she was merely following Thompson's orders, the investigation revealed a pattern of her own dismissive and unapologetic behavior towards passengers, which, when combined with her direct involvement in Jim's case, rendered her employment untenable. American Airlines, keen to show their commitment to customer service and to appease the airport director, made an example of her. Her role as a customer service representative required empathy and the ability to escalate issues appropriately, both of which she had failed to demonstrate. She too found herself effectively ostracized from the industry. The impact on American Airlines at JFK was immediate and far-reaching. Mark Peterson, still reeling from the embarrassment and the direct rebuke from the airport director, implemented a mandatory, rigorous customer service retraining program for all JFK staff, from check-in to gate agents. Emphasis was placed on de-escalation, unbiased service, and strict adherence to booking protocols. A new, more transparent system for management overrides was put in place, requiring multiple levels of approval and explicit documentation. Any deviation from standard procedure would now be scrutinized at the highest levels. Mark personally apologized to Jim, not just once, but multiple times, assuring him that this incident would be a turning point for American Airlines operations at JFK. Jim, for his part, used the incident as a case study in his work as airport director. He mandated that all airlines operating at JFK conduct similar internal reviews of their customer service practices and management oversight. He established a new passenger advocate office, an independent body within airport operations, specifically designed to handle customer complaints that felt unresolved by individual airlines. The message was clear: JFK Airport would not tolerate discriminatory practices, arrogant staff, or abuses of authority by any airline or personnel on its premises. The story, albeit without the revelation of Jim's identity, initially leaked to local news outlets. It became a cautionary tale in aviation circles. Airline staff deny first-class seat to black veteran only to discover, "He's the Airport Director" became a sensational headline, initially based on anonymous sources within the airport. The black veteran aspect, though Jim rarely played the race card, undeniably, added another layer of complexity and outrage for many, highlighting potential implicit biases at play. The public outcry pressured American Airlines to issue a formal public apology, acknowledging a lamentable failure in service and judgment, and pledging a renewed commitment to diversity and inclusion training. Richard Sterling, the golf buddy who received the upgrade, also faced his own minor yet impactful dose of karma. His company, a paper supply distributor, caught wind of the story, especially after it became public that his upgrade was due to a personal favor and not legitimate business. While not directly involved in the discrimination, his association with Michael Thompson and the improper use of a first-class seat became a PR nightmare. His company, sensitive to public perception, distanced themselves from him and initiated their own internal review of his travel expenses and ethical conduct. He didn't lose his job, but his reputation was severely tarnished, and his future upgrades from Michael Thompson were now a thing of the past. The ripple effect extended beyond JFK. Other major airports across the country began to review their own customer service policies, wary of similar incidents occurring on their watch. The incident at JFK served as a stark public reminder that in the interconnected world of social media and instant communication, customer service failures, especially those involving discrimination or abuse of power, would not go unnoticed or unpunished. Jim, back in New York, after his successful conference, observed these changes with a quiet satisfaction. His mission wasn't to punish individuals arbitrarily, but to implement lasting systemic change. The incident, while frustrating and personally insulting, had provided the catalyst for a much-needed overhaul. The hard karma had hit not just as retribution, but as a painful lesson that ultimately aimed to foster a more respectful, equitable, and professional travel experience for everyone. 6 months had passed since the showdown at Gate 22, but the incident had already become a foundational piece of JFK's modern history. The change was not just a memo or a new set of rules. It was a palpable shift in the very atmosphere of the airport. The frantic, often impersonal hum of the terminals now carried an undercurrent of diligence and attentiveness that hadn't existed before. For Dr. James Harrison, walking the concourses was no longer just an inspection. It was a validation of a painful but necessary battle. The changes he had spearheaded were now fully operational and yielding remarkable results. The Passenger Advocate Office, initially just an idea born from his own frustration, had become a celebrated institution within JFK. Housed in a central, accessible location in the main atrium, it was staffed by a dedicated team trained in mediation and customer rights. Jim had personally reviewed their first quarterly report, which was filled not with tales of conflict, but with stories of resolution. There was the case of a family from Ohio, whose connecting flight was cancelled, leaving them stranded. The airline's initial offer was a flight 2 days later. The Advocate Office intervened, liaising directly with airline operations, and secured them seats on a partner airline's flight, leaving that same evening, along with meal vouchers and a formal apology. It was precisely the kind of outcome Jim had envisioned, turning a potential travel nightmare into a testament to good service. The training programs had been completely overhauled. American Airlines, under Mark Peterson's now zealous oversight, had developed a new customer service module called the Harrison Standard. It used an anonymized version of the Gate 22 incident as its core case study, focusing on de-escalation, identifying implicit bias, and understanding the critical importance of protocol. The training emphasized that every passenger, from the nervous first-time flyer to the seasoned business traveler, represented the airline's brand and the airport's reputation. The law of the incident served as a powerful, unspoken warning. Arrogance was a fireable offense and respect was non-negotiable. One crisp autumn afternoon, Jim took a walk through Terminal 4, the very place where the drama had unfolded. He deliberately stood near the American Airlines check-in counters, observing the flow of travelers. He watched as a young agent whose name tag read Maria dealt with a visibly distressed passenger whose baggage was overweight. Instead of a curt demand for payment, Maria spoke in a soft, reassuring tone. She patiently explained the options, helped the passenger repack some items into her carry-on to reduce the weight, and found a way to waive a portion of the fee due to a subtlety in her ticket class. It was an act of kindness and professionalism that would have been unthinkable under Michael Thompson's cynical regime. Jim saw not just an employee following a new rule book, but a person empowered to solve a problem with empathy. He continued his walk towards Gate 22. The area was bustling, preparing for a flight to Paris. The gate agents were smiling, engaging with passengers, and answering questions with a patience that seemed genuine. It was a world away from the cold dismissal he had received from Sarah Jenkins. He felt a pang, not of anger, but of a certain melancholy. Both Thompson and Jenkins had lost their careers over a single profound failure of character. Their downfall had paved the way for this better, more humane system, a fact that weighed on him. True leadership, he knew, sometimes involved making examples of people, a harsh reality he'd learned in the Air Force. But the goal was always the betterment of the whole, the strengthening of the institution. His phone buzzed. It was Mark Peterson. Their relationship had transformed from a professional acquaintance into a strong collaborative partnership. "Jim?" Mark's voice came through, energetic and positive. "Just wanted to let you know our JFK satisfaction scores for the last quarter were the highest in our entire domestic network. We're officially the model for customer service improvement, all thanks to your forceful encouragement." Jim allowed himself a small smile. "That's good to hear, Mark, but the credit goes to your team for embracing the change." "They embraced it because they saw the alternative," Mark said wryly, "and because they have leadership from you and from us that values them for doing the right thing. It's a better place to work now, Jim. The morale is night and day." After the call, Jim stood by the large windows overlooking the airfield. He watched a massive Boeing 707 gleaming under the afternoon sun thunder down the runway and lift gracefully into the sky. On board were hundreds of people, each with a story, a destination, a purpose. He thought about his own journey from a young man serving his country to a colonel commanding respect, and now to the director of this vast, intricate city of motion. His legacy, he realized, wouldn't be measured in on-time departure statistics or new infrastructure projects alone. It would be measured in the unseen moments, the eased anxiety of a stressed traveler, the dignity afforded to every passenger, the quiet professionalism of an agent going the extra mile. The denied first-class seat had been an insult, but it had also been a gift. It had given him a clear, undeniable mandate for change. The hard karma that had struck down two individuals had created a ripple effect of positive transformation for millions. And as he watched the plane disappear into the clouds, Dr. James Harrison knew that his most important mission was well underway, ensuring that John F. Kennedy International Airport was not just a place of transit, but a place that upheld the simple, profound value of human respect. That was the legacy he was determined to build, one flight at a time. What a journey, right? From a simple denied seat to a monumental downfall. This isn't just a story. It's a stark, real-life lesson in humility, respect, and the incredible power of karma. We've seen how arrogance and prejudice, even in seemingly small acts, can unravel into catastrophic consequences when faced with unexpected authority. Dr. James Harrison's story isn't just about an airport director. It's about every single one of us who deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of who we are or what we look like. If this story resonated with you, if it sparked a realization about respect and accountability, then don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button. Share this video with your friends and family. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true stories that highlight the unexpected twists and turns of life. Let's spread the message that professionalism and respect should always be in first class.